Okay, so today we are going to continue. Today we're going to continue reading in the book of Ezekiel. We are in chapter 20, and we're going to get through the end of chapter 24 today, the next section of material. Remember, Ezekiel is getting these prophecies, and he's actually dating them for us, these visions he's having at least. And he is hopefully, very helpfully, compared to the standards of his contemporaries, he is arranging his book according to the chronology in which he received his visions from God. He's just about the only prophet who does that. He does it, though, like I said before, because he is tracking the development. He is tracking down the countdown, basically, to the fall of the city. So it's nice to have one book, one prophet book that actually does pay attention to continuity and chronology. There's a specific reason why he's doing that, though. But hey, whatever it takes, I guess, huh? None of the other prophets ever did that. Okay, anyway, chapter 20. In the 7th year, so now this is about 5th month on the 10th day. So the last batch of visions we got, which started, I believe. Oh man, where did it start? We started last time in chapter 12, but the actual last vision came at the beginning of chapter 8, which was the 6th year, 6th month, 5th day. This is 7th year, 5th month, 10th day. It's about a year later. And then we started at the very beginning of Ezekiel, 5th year, 5th day, 4th month. So it's been about 2 years. He started his prophecies in the 5th year of his captivity. Then he had another batch of visions about a year later in the 6th year. Now he has another batch of visions here about a year after that in the 7th year. As we get closer and closer to the fall of Jerusalem. But Ezekiel's in Babylon. He's already had his disaster. He was taken to Babylon 7 years ago now. But the city itself is still standing, and it has to fall. In the 7th year, in the 5th month, on the 10th day, some of the elders of Israel came to inquire of the Lord, and they sat down in front of me. Now, he'd done this before a few chapters ago, and God kind of got after him for it too, saying, if you're going to come inquire of me while still harboring idols in your heart, don't bother. He has pretty much the same message for them here too, because they're still holding all of their idols in their hearts. At this point, these people in Babylon are no longer taking their idols literally and making statues out of them and putting them up on their household shrines or altars or whatever. They're not doing that anymore, literally, but they still have them in here. Then the word of the Lord came to me. I don't know what they were here to inquire of. Probably asking how the city was doing. Asking how close they were to coming home, probably, but I don't really know for sure. Ezekiel doesn't say that. We don't actually address whatever concern the elders of Israel had, because this is what the Lord has to say instead. Son of man, or human, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Have you come to inquire of me? As surely as I live, I will not let you inquire of me, declares the sovereign Lord. Will you judge them? He's talking to Ezekiel himself here. Will you judge them, son of man? Then confront them with the detestable practices of their fathers, and say to them. Now we just got done making the point a few chapters ago, that the son is not to suffer, son is not to die for his father's sins. So hang on, there's a lesson to be learned here. We have a lot of history to talk about here. There's a lot of stuff to say. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Confront them with their detestable practices of their fathers and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I chose Israel, I swore with uplifted hand to the descendants of the house of Jacob and revealed myself to them in Egypt. With uplifted hand I said to them, so this would have been the time of the Exodus. This is not in the days of Jacob and his sons. This is the generations after when they're still in Egypt and God's about to take them out. With uplifted hand I said to them, I am the Lord your God. We read about that at the beginning of Exodus. On that day I swore to them that I would bring them out of Egypt into a land that I had searched out for them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands. Do you remember how when the cloud and fire that accompanied the Israelites, the cloud that went out by day and the fire that guarded them by night? We read about this in Numbers when they set up camp and they picked up their camp and finally set out after being at Sinai for a year. We read about this cloud that went ahead of them and searched out these locations in the wilderness for them to go. So that's kind of what he's calling back to here, is that God had searched out this land specifically to give to them. And I said to them, each of you, get rid of the vile images you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So they had begun worshiping Egypt's gods while they were in Egypt. That's part of the reason why God sent the plagues on Egypt. Not only was he teaching the Egyptians a lesson, he was teaching the Israelites, the Hebrews, a lesson too, not to follow Egypt's gods. At the end of Joshua, when Joshua was giving his farewell speech to the people, just like Moses did in Deuteronomy, Joshua 24, last chapter in the book of Joshua, let's start with verse 2, as he begins Joshua begins his farewell speech to the people. Joshua said to all the people, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your forefathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the river, the Euphrates River. It's basically where Ezekiel is now, beyond the Euphrates River in Babylon, and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the river, which is where Ezekiel is now again, and led him throughout Canaan and gave him many descendants. Let's skip down now to he gives a recap of their history, which is basically what God is doing here in Ezekiel, although in even more truncated fashion. And now in verse 14 here in Joshua 24, he says, as he finishes his history lesson up to that point in time, he says, now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your forefathers worshipped beyond the river, which we just mentioned, and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. So while they were in Egypt, they did begin worshiping the Egyptian gods. And Ezekiel mentions that here. And we'll mention it again a few more times in the book of Ezekiel. I said to them, back to Ezekiel now, I said to them, each of you, get rid of the vile images you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. But they rebelled against me, and they would not listen to me. They did not get rid of the vile images they had set their eyes on, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them, and spend my anger against them in Egypt. But for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from being profaned in the eyes of the nations they lived among, and in whose sight I had revealed myself to the Israelites by bringing them out of Egypt. Therefore, I led them out of Egypt and brought them into the desert. We read about this, of course, in Exodus and all that. That God was preserving, despite being angry with the people, Moses interceded for them and said, hey, God, if you destroy the people now, you're going to defame your own name in the sight of the nations that saw what you did to the people out of Egypt. And that was right. And God wasn't going to do it. He did not end up bringing his wrath out on the people, even though they deserved it, even though they incurred his wrath. Therefore, I led them out of Egypt and brought them into the desert. I gave them my decrees and made known to them my laws. For the man who obeys them will live by them. And also, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between us, so they would know that I, the Lord, made them holy. The Sabbath was a special covenant sign of Israel's relationship with God, for themselves and the people around them. Every time they observe the Sabbath, which is every week, every week, They were assigned to themselves and assigned to the nations around them, which didn't have a Sabbath custom, that they were in a special covenant relationship with God. But they did not follow the Sabbath, and that then defamed the name of God in the sight of the nations around them, and also caused the Israelites to lose sight of their special relationship with God. I had a bit of a head cold over the weekend. I'm recording this on Tuesday, November 15th, and we had a sharp temperature drop late last week, Thursday night into Friday. Snowing right now, actually. And my body reacted to it by stuffing itself up. And I've been that way for a few days. I'm better now, actually, than I was a couple days ago. I was going to do these recordings on Friday. I had a good opportunity to do some recordings last Friday, and I just couldn't do it because I was too weak, too fatigued. My throat was too sore. I didn't want to spend all that much time talking. I had company coming later that day, too, and I knew that I was going to have to spend time that evening talking with my company. So I can't do it. I had to take I was too fatigued, had to take a couple of naps during the day and rest my throat for that evening. I feel a lot better now, though. My voice is still stuffy, and my nose is still a little stuffy. I have a bit of a cough, and my voice still sounds a little funny, but I'm a lot better now than I was. Yet the people of Israel rebelled against me in the desert. They did not follow my decrees, but rejected my laws. All the man who obeys them will live by them. Now remember, Ezekiel is a priest, so he is putting a very strong emphasis on what the priest was supposed to put a strong emphasis on, which is the law, and explaining and teaching in the law, and the code, the holiness code, which is part of the law, which is in Leviticus, and we'll kind of read a number of things that go back to the holiness code in the middle of Leviticus here. So remember, Ezekiel is a priest, and so he is talking a lot about priestly things. And they utterly desecrated my Sabbaths. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them and destroy them in the desert. But for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from being profaned in the eyes of the nations in whose sight I had brought them out. Also, with uplifted hand, I swore to them in the desert that I would not bring them into the land I had given them, a land flowing with milk and honey, the most beautiful of all lands, because they rejected my laws and did not follow my decrees and desecrated my Sabbaths, for their hearts were devoted to their idols. Now, in the actual account in the book of Numbers, we read that the specific incident that caused God to vow that those people would never enter his land was when they went into the land, they spied out the land, they sent the 12 men into the land to spy out the land, and they came back, and 10 of the 12 spies gave a good report about the land. The land itself was good, and it fit everything they had heard about it, like it was a good land, but they didn't think they could take it. The people living there were just too powerful, too big, their cities were too well fortified, they were too strong, and there was just nothing they could do. 2 spies said, we can take it anyway. I mean, even that may not have been inaccurate. That was a factual account of what it was like. The people were bigger, they were stronger, their cities were fortified, they were better prepared for battle and war than the Israelites were. That was all actually true. But they were not putting faith in their God. The 10 spies that came back and spread fear amongst the rest of the camp did so because they misplaced their trust. They thought they had to take this land and had forgotten that God was going to let them have it if they followed him. 2 of the spies remembered that and wanted the people to go in and take it anyway because God was going to be with them and would give them the victory. But they didn't get listened to. The 10 that gave the bad report were the ones that were listened to, and so God said to that entire generation, except for those 2 guys, you're not going to get in here. Now here, it's being reframed as though it's basically a violation of the laws. Again, Ezekiel is a priest, and he is kind of recapping their entire history in priestly form here. Yet I looked on them with pity, and did not destroy them, or put an end to them in the desert. I said to their children in the desert, the generation that did end up going into the land, Do not follow the statutes of your fathers, or keep their laws, or defile yourselves with their idols. Now, obviously not the laws that God gave them, but whatever laws they made for themselves. I am the Lord your God. Follow my decrees, and be careful to keep my laws. Not the laws that your fathers made for yourselves, but my laws. Keep my Sabbaths holy, that they may be a sign between us. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. So the children were not being held responsible for the sins of the fathers. The sins of the fathers kept them from entering the land, but the children were going to be able to enter the land, despite the sins of the fathers. But the children themselves rebelled against me. Now this generation did make it into the land, but they had their own problems. And they were generally a better generation, too. This was Joshua's generation, and they were generally speaking a better generation of Israelites. But that doesn't mean they didn't have their own problems. They did not follow my decrees, so they were not careful to keep my laws. Well, the man who obeys them will live by them. And they desecrated my Sabbaths. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them, and spend my anger against them in the desert. But I withheld my hand. Now, we read about some of the problems that the second generation had at the beginning or the middle of the book of Numbers. Once they get done with the 40-year wilderness wanderings, they do eventually make it into the land. And Joshua's generation, more or less, is a faithful generation. But they had their own problems, especially when they were in the desert, before they got into the land. But I withheld my hand, for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from being profaned, in the eyes of the nations in whose sight I had brought them out. Also, with uplifted hand I swore to them in the desert, that I would disperse them among the nations, and scatter them through the countries. Now, I don't know when this exactly is referring to. This could be a reference to the end of the the book of Leviticus, and then Deuteronomy, when it talks about the curses of the covenant, blessing and cursing. The covenant of blessing and cursing, which is mentioned at the end of Leviticus and repeated at the end of Deuteronomy. I don't know of any specific example where he said he would do this outside of that. Because they had not obeyed my laws, but had rejected my decrees and desecrated my Sabbaths, and their eyes lusted after their fathers' idols. So they're not being held responsible for their fathers' sins, but they are repeating their fathers' sins because their eyes are lusting after their fathers' idols. I also gave them over to statutes that were not good, and laws they could not live by. I let them become defiled through their gifts, the sacrifice of every firstborn, that I might fill them with horror, so they would know that I am Lord. One of the things that God will do to judge our sin is he'll turn us over to it. If we get to the point where we're just determined that we're not going to follow God no matter what, God will stop trying to call us to follow him, and he'll just let us go at it. That will only make our condition worse, of course, but that is part of the way that God judges our sin, is just give us over to it. So in this context, again, I don't know exactly what he's referring to in terms of what historical event, because nothing like this, from what I can tell, actually happened in that generation, but in generally speaking, when the people turned away from him, he let them do whatever they wanted to do eventually. He would try to restrain them for a period of time, but if they're just determined to turn away from him, he will let them go. He will let people do this if they're just determined to do it. He's not going to make you follow him. He's not going to make you do what he wants you to do. Therefore, Son of Man, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. And this also your fathers blasphemed me by forsaking me. When I brought them into the land I had sworn to give them, and they saw any high hill or any leafy tree, there they offered their sacrifices, made offerings that provoked me to anger, presented their fragrant incense, that's their prayers, in other words, and poured out their drink offerings. We've been seeing this happen since the beginning. They've been building these high places and offering things there almost in the very beginning. Then I said to them, what is this high place you go to? And it is called Bama, or high place, to this day. So it got to the point where they would call any site like this a high place, even if it wasn't necessarily a high place. It started out on the hilltops, the actual literal high places, but they became so common and so widespread they would be anywhere. And they were called high places because that's just the lingering term that was left over from when they were actually built on high places. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Will you defile yourselves the way your fathers did, and lust after their vile images? So again, they're not being held responsible for their father's sins, but they're following in their father's footsteps. They're committing the same sin. They're lusting after the same idols. When you offer your gifts, the sacrifice of your sons in the fire, you continue to defile yourselves with all your idols to this day. Am I to let you inquire of me, O house of Israel? As surely as I live, remember, he's still talking to people who are sitting in front of him, who came to inquire of God. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will not let you inquire of me. You say, we want to be like the nations, like the peoples of the world, who serve wood and stone. That's kind of like what they said when they wanted to make a king. But what you have in mind will never happen. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will rule over you with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with outpoured wrath. I will bring you from the nations and gather you from the countries where you have been scattered, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with outpoured wrath. I will bring you into the desert of the nations, and there, face to face, I will execute judgment on you. As I judged your fathers in the desert of the land of Egypt, so I will judge you, declares the sovereign Lord. I will take note of you as you pass under my rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I'm not entirely certain what that refers to. The closest thing that I thinks of, I mean, it sounds to me like he's counting them as they're passing under a rod. I get the impression of like a shepherd who is like counting his flock as he's hurrying them back into the pen or something. But it could also be referring to a specific provision in the law at the end of the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 27, the last chapter of the book of Leviticus. Let's see here, where is it? Chapter, verse 9. No. Here. Very end of the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 27, starting in verse 30. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. If a man redeems any of his tithe, he must add a fifth of the value to it. The entire tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod, will be holy to the Lord. He must not pick out the good from the bad, or make any substitution. If he does make a substitution, both the animal and its substitute become holy, which is devoted to the Lord, and cannot be redeemed. So it sounds like they would have the animals pass through some kind of line as they let them into the gate of the pen or whatever, and there was a rod that they would use to count the animals as they came in. So that seems to be what he's talking about here. I will take note of you as you pass under my rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge you of those who revolt and rebel against me. Although I will bring them out of the land where they are living, yet they will not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord. As for you, O house of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says. So he's talking now to the elders again, I guess. Go and serve your idols, every one of you. So go and do whatever you want to do. You're determined not to do what God wants you to do, so just go and do whatever you want to do. But afterward you will surely listen to me, and no longer profane my holy name with your gifts and idols. For on my holy mountain, the high mountain of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord, there in the land the entire house of Israel will serve me. And there I will accept the entire house while your herds of both nations. There I will acquire your offerings and your choice gifts, along with all your holy sacrifices. I will accept you as fragrant incense when I bring you out from the nations and gather you from the countries where you have been scattered. And I will show myself holy among you in the sight of the nations. That means to be made pure. Again, that was a major job of the priests, was to be pure and to make things pure, to set apart the clean from the unclean, to make that difference known to the people. Then you will know that I am the Lord, when I bring you into the land of Israel, the land I have sworn with uplifted hand to give to your fathers. There you will remember your conduct and all the actions by which you have defiled yourselves. And you will loathe yourselves for all the evil you have done. You will know that I am the Lord, when I deal with you for my name's sake, and not according to your evil ways and your corrupt practices, O house of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. That's actually it for that chapter. There are a few more verses, but the chapter should end there. So we're going to go ahead and end it there, because that discussion is now over.